I like to think of myself as a telephoto lens enjoyer and not your average wide-angle fan. But every so often you need to peer over the fence and see what the others are doing. That means I have to buy a wide-angle lens. Now, I could use this 24mm lens with a field of view of 84 degrees, but that's just not wide. Now, I have used a 14mm lens with a 114 degree field of view, but even that isn't wide enough. So I bought this, a Nikon 16mm f2.8 fisheye with an insane 180 degree field of view, making this a true wide lens. So let's start with the basics. What is a fisheye lens? Well, a fisheye lens is a type of ultra wide angle lens that can capture an extremely wide field of view at around 180 degrees. But there are fisheye lenses that go further. The 6mm Nikon has a 220 degree field of view, which means it can actually see behind itself due to that crazy front element. The 6mm fisheye, like that's my hand. When you're using a fisheye lens, you'll notice that it has a very distinct distortion, which gives your photos a curved, kind of almost spherical look. And this is apparently what a fish sees due to the refraction of light passing from air into the water, into the fish's eye. Get it? A fisheye lens. Now, using a fisheye lens is a tricky thing. The extreme barrel distortion needs to be part of the composition and enhance the image rather than being the image itself. And of course, because of these insane wide angles, you can create some very interesting images, but it does come at the cost of that distortion. Personally, I found this actually very useful for photographing crowds and events like the St. Patrick's Day Parade here in Dublin. You can also use the fisheye distortion to separate the subject in a different way to using depth of field. So the fisheye effect makes things close to the lens appear much bigger while shrinking the background and pushing it really far away. And this can be used to separate the subject from the background while everything from the dust on the lens to the International Space Station is in focus. This effect can actually be seen in this picture of Luna. By the way, when I was taking this picture, I was barely 30 centimeters from Luna when I took this, and you can actually see my shadow in the corner. So when you're using ultra wides like this, you kind of need to be careful of what's in the frame and what's not in the frame, because everything ends up in the frame. And while you should be using the distortion to make your image, it can be an issue. If the lens is a hair off level, it will cause issues like the horizon turning into a flat earth conspiracy tool, or the spaghettification of anything near the edge of the frame. Now, the stretching of the edges around the frame can actually be quite useful for creating frame in a frame shots. If the edge of the frame is kind of chaotic, like leaves, but things that are normally straight can look kind of odd. Like this window in Tokyo Tower that's still in the shot, even though the lens was actually pressed up against the glass while taking it. As for the lens itself, it's an AFD Nikkor lens, so it does have autofocus using the older screwdriver method. As for sharpness, it's pretty sharp, no complaints, and it's decently fast at f2.8. However, having the shorter focal length of 16mm means you can push your shutter speeds down quite a bit and get away with a lot with this lens. On the newer Z mount, when using the FTZ, it does work, but you lose autofocus because Nikon won't get off their ass and make an FTZ adapter with the AF motor. Now this lens does have a cool trick. Because you can't use any filters, because we'll look at it where they're supposed to go, there's actually rear bayonet filters you can change. So you can actually swap these out for different versions. However, you always need a filter to be here. So if you're buying one of these lenses, make sure to check that it has the rear bayonet filter. It's called an L37C, that's Nikon's clear filter. You can also get colored filters and warming and cooling filters for this as well in this little rear bayonet mount. Now, if you're looking for one of these, there are older versions of this lens out there in AI and AIS, but this AF version is the last one that Nikon made. Before I wrap up this video, I just want to quickly explain full frame versus circular fisheye lenses. Now, a circular fisheye is one that does not actually cover the full sensor of what you're shooting and thus produces a perfectly circular image on the sensor. These lenses tend not to have any lens hoods or petals because the 180-degree field of view would show it in the image. A full frame fisheye, like this one on the other hand, will cover the full sensor. And that's because it has an image circle larger than the actual full frame sensor or the film that you're shooting on. This allows it to have these like petals around the lens hood because these parts of the image that would be blocked by it are actually cut out by being outside of the sensor area, and thus you can get like a bit of protection on the lens and get a full frame image. So, should you buy a fisheye lens? I'd say no. It's a bit of a silly lens, to be honest. It does have its usages and it can be a powerful composition tool, but it is also super specialized. It's one of those items that's useless 97% of the time, but for the few times you do need it, it can be invaluable. And I'm definitely going to keep mine around for certain use cases. But anyway, that's it for this video. See you next time.